First of all, welcome to the show, Catherine Liu. Thanks for coming on.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for writing this book. This book has you eloquently articulate everything I've felt in my bones since Barack Obama got elected, and maybe even before that. I knew that Bill Clinton was no friend of the working class, and I also read a book. This book will radicalize you if you read it, just like when I read Thomas Frank's Listen Liberal. Now, most of my friends, my old friends in Hollywood, don't talk to me anymore because they didn't read that book. And
any book,
and so they're what you would call a virtue signaler. They vote for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, and they pat themselves on the back for being against fascism. I'm not kidding. That's what they think, and they think anybody who critiques the Democratic Party or the professional managerial class is a traitor and a grifter and doing it for money. So I just want to read a couple of quotes. First of all, could you define, what do you call the professional managerial class?
Well, okay, these are credentialed elites. These are people who don't just have money, they have resources and they have degrees. They have, they're affiliated with professional organizations like doctors, like lawyers, have the ABA. We have professional organizations, and they're supposed to be a class of people with expertise who are supposed to be neutral about political issues, but sort of mediating between working class people and, the bosses, the capitalists. And they've been since 1900, sort of on the ascendancy in the US as capitalism becomes more and more complex. You need people to manage all sorts of things from finance to health. And today they make up about 25% of the workforce, but the top layer of this class really hoards resources, networks, everything else. They're in Hollywood, they're in the government, and they really believe themselves to be on the side of progress. I think they're the biggest obstacles to any political or economic transformation that we can envision in the United States, because they basically like the status quo.
Exactly.
They use words like empower people because they always are actors. Other people are passive, and they're always like in NGOs asking you for money. I just got a whole bunch at the end of the year. I'm sure we all do solicitations for contributions. They're like, we're empowering these people. We're empowering these people, and it's always them acting. They're terrified of actually mass politics and working class power.
So let me just read a couple of quotes from your book, and because they're very eye-opening. To defeat reactionary politics masquerading as populism. Now, I would consider that, like when I watch Sean Hannity, and a lot of what happens on Fox News is they pretend to care about the working man, and they could pretend they're pretending to be populist. So to defeat reactionary politics masquerading as populism, we need anti-professional managerial class struggle from the left, not more identity politics, which has become just another vehicle of the professional managerial class of virtue signaling, which is what I tried to impart to Cornel West when he came on my show, and he doesn't want to hear any of it. I'll play that clip in a minute. In liberal circles, talking about class or class consciousness before other forms of difference is not just controversial, it's heretical. They call you a class reductionist. I've been called a class reductionist.
Stupid,
If you argue that race, gender, and class are not interchangeable categories, they pile on with the legalistic and deadly term intersectional to accommodate the materialistic critique of their politics. The professional managerial class simply does not want its class identity or interests unmasks. I do not opine on the professional managerial class because I hope to have a civil discussion about our differences. I'm writing this critique to isolate the professional managerial class's historically grounded virtue hoarding politics of liberal refusal to adopt and support the social and political changes that we desperately need. The dark social consequences of its monopoly on expertise, in addition to its attempts to monopolize public virtue while blocking any attempts at meaningful economic redistribution, has given shape to our present political situation. So let me bring you back in. That's so well said. they always it could have easily been called virtue signalers, because that's what they do. They concentrate and put all their focus on virtue signaling, and they put and anything to materially help workers. So like I've heard someone talk about the left in the United States is made up of the professional managerial class. They're not actually connected to workers and blue collar people like the left is in Europe and other places. That's why they have strikes all the time. And here in America, strikes that's bad. It's so close to Christmas. Why would why would they go on Craig? That's what the news media says, and that's what the prevention. So let me just bring you in, and you could go ahead and comment on any part of that you'd like.
Well, so one of the things that's happened with its form of anti-racism, which we should all be against, is that it's become part of a managerial system of like training employees to speak in a certain way to be acceptable in liberal circles. And all of the things that they say they want, which is social justice, is blocked by this attempt to groom the way we actually relate to each other in a social way. And so it costs the bosses and the capitalists no money to change language all the time, to keep us unmoored, to take away our connection to ordinary people. I hate to say this, but I just want to say ordinary people. Ordinary people are rejecting this kind of politics, or they don't even, or it just demobilizes them. And so it's a great way for the PMC, which votes, to make people not want to vote, actually, because when you see the sort of florid linguistic changes that they're always making about progress, what it actually blocks is what we need, which is single-payer health care. We desperately, desperately need that in this country. We need social and public housing. We need better care for children and for mothers, working mothers especially. But none of the PMC, like phalanxes that take care of these things, they can't focus on these what I could like to call bread and butter issues. Like you try to focus them on bread and butter issues, and suddenly they're like off on like planet Mars, talking about like their radical vanguardist thing. And so one thing I like to think about this, like within academia now, is that they're like the cool kids. They're always trying to find the edgiest way of being radical in language, but not have to actually transform the relationships of power. So what anti-racism has given us in the liberal professions, the media, academia, where we live, is new human resources protocols to control and surveil workers. So why is the African-American vote, the Latino vote, leaving the Democratic Party? Because people know that this liberal progressive party allegedly is not on their side. And out of desperation, they move to a guy who has this like rough, completely, ridiculous style, Donald Trump, who seems uncensored, unfiltered. And they're like, at least I can get some emotional catharsis because I've got these people like talking down to me. And I wanted to say, I use the word hoarding because that's what rich people do. They hoard resources, they hoard money. And the professional managerial class says, they're above money, but they're very comfortable, and they hoard symbolic capital. They hoard things that
crypto. It's like a form of crypto. Your virtue is like a cryptocurrency for them.
Yes, it is like a form of crypto. And like in the old days, the virtue used to be like a way of controlling the self, right? So that is about, speaking the truth, being sexually and aggressively like in self-control. And so they're just like, we are the people who can really know how to control ourselves, control conversations. And anyone who doesn't speak in this style or ascribe to what we think is the good, we think should be left behind. We think are, in Hillary Clinton's words, the deplorables. I mean, I can't believe that lady still has a platform, but she does. I literally cannot understand why people still listen to her about anything. But she does have this like Protestant, grim, Methodist, like virtuous way of being. And part of me is like, America's never really gotten over our old Puritanism. They're like the, I don't know, they're like these new Puritans too. And in the meantime, the country is dying. Like if you go into the Rust Belt, the industrial, I just saw the economic numbers today. We're growing 5.5%, but young people don't have any hope. And there's no, unless you play this like really ideologically stringent game and go to college, or you just like hustle your ass for the rest of your lives. Like working class young people just don't feel like they have any hope. You know what the median house cost is in Southern California where I live? $881,000. That's the median. That's like your average, ordinary, not so great, not so bad house. And so, I don't know. I think people should be angry. I think people should be really outraged. I think we should be talking to worker discontent. And the other thing that virtue hoarding does is it takes away dignity from people who are not college educated.
So,
because you're always like, oh, did I see the wrong thing? Oh, shoot, I didn't put the recycling in the right bag. It's like they're all like about this kind of control of the other through consumption and individual acts.
And so what? Like, but what the professional managerial class and the what they are in service of the establishment. And what has been the greatest gift to them is Donald Trump, in a sense that they can demonize him as the whipping boy. He's the worst thing of everything. He's racist. He's fascist. So you have to go and vote for more of this stuff that gave rise to Donald Trump. So what I've always said is I'm not angry at Donald Trump. I'm angry at the system that made people desperate enough to vote for a game show host billionaire who didn't even want to be president in the first place. And so we're not angry at that system so they can keep people distracted when they think they're fighting fascism. What they're really doing is they're being manipulated by the real fascists, which is the establishment, to get them to focus on Donald Trump instead of focus on the symptom or the system that made people desperate enough to vote for Donald Trump. And that's what I tried to impart to Cornel West when he was on my show, and he wouldn't have any of it. He just kept referring to Donald Trump as a fascist and fighting white supremacy.